The next day at school, whispers filled the hallways. Ethan's confrontation with the bully had become the talk of the campus. Some students were impressed by how calm and collected he'd been, while others thought it was just a lucky moment. That wouldn't last. The bully himself seemed quieter than usual, avoiding eye contact as he walked through the crowded corridors. But Ethan knew better than to think the issue was resolved. Bullies didn't back down easily, especially not someone like him. During lunch, Ethan found himself sitting alone at his usual spot near the edge of the cafeteria. He wasn't surprised. Most kids avoided sitting with him because they didn't want to draw attention from the bully or his group. As he quietly ate his sandwich, he noticed the bully approaching with a few of his friends trailing behind. Ethan tensed up, wondering what was coming next. Was this another round of taunts? Or worse? But instead of yelling or shoving him, the bully stopped a few feet away and looked directly at Ethan. His face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "What did you mean yesterday?" he asked abruptly, cutting straight to the point. "You said I don't know anything about strength. What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. He hadn't expected the bully to actually care about what he'd said. For a moment, he considered brushing it off, but something inside him decided to take the risk. Maybe this was his chance to show the bully and everyone else that strength wasn't just about muscles or intimidation. It was about standing your ground, even when you're scared. "I meant exactly what I said," Ethan replied steadily, meeting the bully's gaze. "Pushing people around doesn't make you strong. Real strength is knowing who you are and sticking to it no matter what anyone says." The bully frowned, clearly unsure how to respond. His friends shifted uncomfortably beside him, glancing at each other as if waiting for their leader to react. But the bully didn't laugh or lash out. Instead, he crossed his arms and tilted his head slightly, studying Ethan like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "Yeah? And what do you know about being strong?" He shot back, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. Ethan hesitated for a second. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was his chance to prove that he wasn't just the janitor's kid. Slowly, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small device wrapped in a cloth. Unfolding it carefully, he revealed a tiny drone, sleek and compact, with blinking lights along its frame. It wasn't much to look at, but Ethan knew its potential. "This," he said simply, holding it up for the bully to see. "This is what I've been working on. It helps my dad with his job around the school. It can fly into tight spaces, check for leaks, and even pick up tools he can't reach. I built it myself." The bully stared at the drone, his expression shifting from skepticism to mild interest. "That thing looks like a toy," he muttered, though there was less venom in his voice now. One of his friends snickered, but the bully silenced them with a quick glare. "It's not a toy," Ethan said firmly. "It's a prototype. Watch." With that, he activated the drone, and it sprang to life, hovering smoothly above the table. Ethan guided it with a small remote control, making it zip through the air, weave between chairs, and perform a perfect loop before landing gently back on the table. The entire cafeteria went quiet, watching in awe as the little machine demonstrated its precision and agility. Even the bully couldn't hide his surprise. His jaw tightened as he watched the drone execute another flawless maneuver, this time retrieving a pencil someone had dropped nearby. "How did you—" he started to ask, trailing off as he struggled to find the right words. "I taught myself," Ethan explained, his voice steady. "I read books, watched videos, and spent months building it. It wasn't easy, but I didn't give up. That's what real strength looks like, not bullying people or tearing them down." For a long moment, no one spoke. The bully stood frozen, his usual bravado replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe even respect. His friends exchanged awkward glances, unsure how to handle the situation. Finally, the bully shook his head and turned to walk away, muttering under his breath. But before he left, he glanced back at Ethan and said almost reluctantly, "Not bad, for a nerd." Ethan didn't smile or celebrate. He knew the bully wasn't ready to admit defeat, not yet, anyway. But something had shifted. For the first time, the bully saw Ethan as more than just an easy target. And Ethan? He felt a spark of hope. Maybe standing up for himself wasn't such a bad idea after all. Later that afternoon, as Ethan packed up his things after class, he overheard snippets of conversations among his classmates. Some were still skeptical, calling him weird or nerdy, but others sounded genuinely intrigued. Someone mentioned wanting to see the drone in action again, while another joked about challenging Ethan to a tech battle. Ethan chuckled to himself, shaking his head. Life at school might never be completely drama-free, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was starting to carve out a place for himself. As he walked home that evening, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the encounter with the bully. Sure, it hadn't gone perfectly and the bully was probably still angry, but deep down, Ethan knew he'd planted a seed. Maybe someday the bully would realize that strength isn't about power, it's about courage, perseverance, and doing the right thing, even when it's hard. For now, though, Ethan focused on what he could control, improving his drone, helping his dad, and proving to himself that he was capable of so much more than anyone, including the bully, had ever given him credit for. The buzz around Ethan's showdown with the bully only grew louder over the next few days. Students who had never paid him much attention before were now curious about the quiet kid who dared to stand up for himself. Some even whispered that maybe he wasn't as ordinary as they'd thought. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said Ethan was secretly a genius, while others joked that his drone might be part of some top-secret government project. Of course, none of it was true, but Ethan didn't bother correcting them. He was too busy thinking about what came next. Meanwhile, the bully seemed to retreat into himself. Gone was the loud, brash persona that once dominated the hallways. Instead, he moved through the school with a quieter energy, his usual swagger replaced by something closer to frustration, or maybe confusion. Ethan noticed the change, but he didn't dwell on it. Whatever the bully was feeling, it wasn't Ethan's problem anymore. Or so he told himself. Then, one afternoon after gym class, the bully cornered Ethan near the lockers again. This time, though, there was no shoving or insults. Instead, the bully leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and fixed Ethan with an intense stare. "You're not done surprising me, are you?" he said, his tone somewhere between curiosity and irritation. Ethan raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. "What do you mean?" "I mean your little gadget," the bully replied, gesturing vaguely with his hand. "That thing you showed everyone, you built it yourself, right? No help from anyone?" "Yeah, I did," Ethan answered cautiously. "Why does it matter?" The bully hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Look, I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It's actually kind of impressive." The last part came out grudgingly, almost like it pained him to admit it. "But here's the thing, I don't lose, ever. And if you think you can just waltz in with your fancy toy and make me look stupid, you've got another thing coming." Ethan frowned, trying to understand where this was heading. Was the bully threatening him again? But instead of getting angry, the bully straightened up and looked Ethan square in the eye. "We're settling this. Fair and square." "Settling what?" Ethan asked, genuinely confused. "A competition," the bully shot back. "The science fair is coming up and we're both entering. Winner takes all." Ethan blinked, taken aback. A competition? With the bully? That was the last thing he expected. "Wait, hold on," he said, holding up a hand. "You want to compete against me? In the science fair?" "That's what I said, isn't it?" the bully snapped, his old arrogance creeping back into his voice. "Unless you're too scared to face me." Ethan felt a flicker of annoyance at the jab but quickly pushed it aside. Competing in the science fair wasn't something he'd planned on doing, but the idea lit a spark inside him. Here was a chance to prove himself, not just to the bully, but to everyone who doubted him. Besides, backing down now would only give the bully more ammunition to use against him later. "Fine," Ethan said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it, but don't expect me to go easy on you." The bully smirked, clearly pleased with himself. Wouldn't dream of it. See ya. At the fair, nerd. Over the next few weeks, the school buzzed with anticipation. Word of the upcoming showdown spread like wildfire, turning what might have been a low-key event into something closer to a spectacle. Posters went up in the hallways advertising the science fair, complete with bold letters teasing a battle of the brains. Even teachers got caught up in the excitement, encouraging students to participate and see what all the fuss was about. For Ethan, the preparation became a full-time job. Every spare moment was spent refining his drone, adding new features and tweaking its performance. He wanted it to be perfect, not just functional, but dazzling. His dad, noticing how hard Ethan was working, offered to help test it late at night when the school was empty. Together they ran drills, sending the drone flying through classrooms and storage areas, testing its ability to navigate obstacles and complete tasks autonomously. At the same time, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what the bully was up to. The guy wasn't known for being book smart, so how exactly did he plan to compete? Rumors floated around that he'd enlisted the help of his older sibling, someone who supposedly knew a thing or two about engineering. Ethan tried not to let it bother him, but the thought nagged at him. What if the bully had an unfair advantage? One evening, as Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor of his room surrounded by wires and tools, his dad walked in carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "How's it going?" he asked, handing one mug to Ethan. "It's, okay," Ethan admitted, blowing on the steaming liquid. "I just keep thinking about what happens if I lose. Everyone will laugh, and the bully will never." "Let me hear the end of it." His dad sat down beside him, giving him a thoughtful look. "You know, son, winning isn't always about beating someone else. Sometimes it's about proving something to yourself. If you put your heart into this, no matter what happens, you'll come out stronger." Ethan nodded slowly, letting his dad's words sink in. Maybe he was focusing too much on the outcome and not enough on the process. After all, building the drone had already taught him so much. It had given him confidence, patience, and a sense of purpose. Whether or not he won the competition, those lessons wouldn't disappear. As the days ticked by, the tension between Ethan and the bully reached a fever pitch. They avoided each other in the hallways, but their rivalry loomed large, casting a shadow over everything. Other students took sides, placing bets on who would win. Some rooted for Ethan, inspired by his quiet determination, while others backed the bully, convinced he'd find a way to crush the competition. Finally, the day of the science fair arrived. The gymnasium was transformed into a bustling exhibition hall, filled with colorful displays, buzzing gadgets, and nervous participants setting up their projects. Ethan stood at his table, carefully arranging his drone and its remote control. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the final settings, but he forced himself to take deep breaths. This was it, the moment he'd been working toward. Across the room, the bully was putting the finishing touches on his own project, a robotic arm designed to lift objects and perform basic tasks. It was bulky and clunky compared to Ethan's sleek drone, but it still drew a crowd of curious onlookers. The bully glanced over at Ethan occasionally, his expression unreadable. Was he nervous, confident, angry? Ethan couldn't tell. When it was time for the presentations, Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He introduced his drone to the judges, explaining how it worked and demonstrating its capabilities. The audience watched in awe as the tiny machine zipped through hoops, dodged obstacles, and retrieved items with pinpoint accuracy. When Ethan finished, the room erupted into applause, and he allowed himself a small smile. He'd done everything he could. Next, it was, the bully's turn. He presented his robotic arm with bravado, showing off its strength by lifting heavy weights and its precision by stacking blocks neatly. But halfway through the demonstration, disaster struck. A wire snapped, causing the arm to malfunction. With a loud crash, it dropped a stack of books onto the floor, sending the crowd gasping. The bully flushed red, clearly embarrassed, but he quickly recovered, laughing it off as if it were part of the act. As the judges deliberated, the atmosphere in the gym grew tense. Ethan tried to stay calm, reminding himself that he'd done his best. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the outcome hung in the balance. When the winners were finally announced, the room fell silent. In first place, the head judge declared, pausing dramatically, is Ethan Carter for his innovative drone design. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Ethan felt a surge of relief wash over him. For once, he wasn't just the janitor's kid, he was a winner. As he accepted his award, he glanced across the room at the bully, who was standing quietly with his arms crossed. There was no anger in his expression, just a hint of admiration, and maybe even respect. In that moment, Ethan realized something important. Winning wasn't just about trophies or bragging rights. It was about pushing past fear, embracing challenges, and discovering strengths he never knew he had. And as the applause continued, he knew this was only the beginning of his story. The science fair was over, but its impact rippled through the school like waves in a pond. Ethan's victory had turned him into an overnight sensation, or at least as close to one as you could get in a small suburban high school. Students who used to ignore him now stopped to chat, asking questions about his drone and how he'd built it. Teachers praised him during class, holding him up as an example of hard work and creativity. Even the principal mentioned Ethan in the morning announcements, congratulating him for bringing pride to the school. But despite all the attention, Ethan stayed grounded. He didn't let the praise go to his head, knowing that real success wasn't about trophies or applause. It was about the journey, the late nights spent tinkering, the moments of frustration when nothing seemed to work, and the quiet satisfaction of finally solving a problem. Still, he couldn't deny that winning felt good. For once, people saw him not as the janitor's kid, but as someone capable of achieving something extraordinary. Meanwhile, the bully handled his loss differently. At first, he tried to brush it off, acting like it didn't matter. He joked with his friends about how building robots wasn't exactly his thing anyway, and how he preferred sports to science fairs. But deep down, the loss gnawed at him. The bully wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone like Ethan. In his mind, Ethan was supposed to be easy to beat, someone he could crush without breaking a sweat. Instead, Ethan had proven himself smarter, more determined, and maybe even stronger than the bully had ever imagined. For days after the science fair, the bully avoided Ethan, steering clear of him in the hallways and skipping lunch periods where they might cross paths. But avoiding the situation only made things worse. Every time he heard someone mention Ethan's name or saw the drone sitting proudly on display in the trophy case outside the principal's office, the bully felt a pang of guilt, and something else he couldn't quite name. Was it respect? Admiration? He didn't know, and that uncertainty bothered him more than anything. One afternoon, while Ethan was helping his dad clean out a storage closet near the gym, the bully appeared unexpectedly. Ethan looked up, surprised to see him standing there, hands shoved into his pockets and his usual swagger noticeably absent. "Hey," the bully said awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Can we talk?" Ethan hesitated, unsure what to expect. Part of him wanted to say no, to walk away and leave the bully stewing in his own thoughts, but another part of him was curious. What did the bully want? Reluctantly, Ethan nodded and set down the mop he'd been using. "Sure. What's up?" The bully glanced around, making sure no one else was nearby before speaking. "Look, He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I wanted to say, well, congratulations. You deserve to win." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in the bully's voice. This wasn't the cocky, aggressive guy who'd shoved him against the wall weeks earlier. This was someone different, someone vulnerable, almost human. "Thanks," Ethan replied cautiously. "That means a lot." The bully rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "Yeah, well, I guess I underestimated you. Thought you were just some quiet kid who wouldn't put up much of a fight. Turns out I was wrong." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He studied the bully's face, searching for any sign of mockery or sarcasm, but found none. The bully seemed genuinely remorseful, which was strange enough to make Ethan wonder if he was dreaming. Finally, he spoke. "Why are you telling me this?" The bully sighed, dropping his gaze to the floor. "Because I messed up, okay? I've been thinking about everything. That day in the hallway, the competition, all of it. And I realized something. I've been treating people like crap because I thought it made me look tough. But the truth is, I'm not tough. Not really. All I've been doing is hiding behind fear, afraid of looking weak, afraid of failing, afraid of being ignored. He looked up, meeting Ethan's eyes. You showed me that strength isn't about pushing people around. It's about standing your ground even when you're scared, and I need to do better. Ethan stared at him, stunned. He hadn't expected an apology, let alone such a raw and honest admission. For a moment he considered brushing it off, telling the bully it didn't matter. But then he remembered his own struggles, the loneliness, the self-doubt, the countless times he'd wished someone would see him for who he truly was. Maybe this was his chance to help someone else, the way others had helped him. You can start by apologizing to everyone else you've hurt, Ethan said gently. Not just me. There are probably a lot of people who felt the same way I did, scared, invisible, like they didn't matter. If you really want to change, that's where you should begin. The bully nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, you're right, I'll figure it out, thanks man. As the bully walked away, Ethan leaned against the wall, exhaling deeply. He hadn't expected their rivalry to end like this, with forgiveness instead of anger, understanding instead of resentment. But life had a funny way of surprising you when you least expected it. Over the next few weeks, subtle changes began to ripple through the school. The bully started keeping his distance from trouble, opting to spend more time in the library or working on projects rather than picking fights in the hallways. Some students noticed the shift and whispered among themselves, wondering if he'd finally grown up. Others remained skeptical, convinced it was just a phase that would pass. Either way, the atmosphere felt lighter, less tense. Ethan, meanwhile, continued to pursue his passion for inventing. With the confidence boost from the science fair, he decided to enter another competition, a regional robotics challenge held at a nearby university. This time, however, he wasn't going it alone. Inspired by the bully's attempt to reinvent himself, Ethan reached out to a few classmates who shared his interest in technology. Together, they formed a team, pooling their skills and ideas to create something bigger and better than any of them could have done individually. Their project was ambitious, a fully autonomous robot designed to assist teachers in classrooms. It could deliver materials, answer student questions, and even monitor attendance. Building it required long hours of brainstorming, coding, and troubleshooting, but the process brought the group closer together. They laughed, argued, and celebrated each milestone as a team, learning not just about robotics but also about collaboration and trust. On the day of the competition, nerves ran high. Teams from schools across the state gathered in the university auditorium, showcasing their creations to panels of judges and eager spectators. When it was Ethan's team's turn to present, they stepped forward with confidence, explaining their robot's features and demonstrating its capabilities. The audience watched in amazement as the robot navigated the stage, interacting seamlessly with volunteers and completing tasks with precision. When the winners were announced, Ethan's team didn't take first place, but they came in second, earning a certificate of excellence and a standing ovation from the crowd. As they posed for photos with their robot, Ethan felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he'd experienced before. Winning wasn't everything. What mattered most was the journey and the connections he'd made along the way. Back at school, news of their achievement spread quickly. Students cheered for Ethan and his teammates, proud of what they'd accomplished. Even the bully stopped by to congratulate them, offering a genuine smile and a thumbs up. "You guys killed it," he said simply. Seriously impressive. Ethan grinned, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be. But for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibilities. He'd faced challenges, stood up for himself, and inspired others to do the same. And as he looked around at the faces of his friends, his family, and even the bully, he realized something important. Strength wasn't just about standing alone. It was about lifting others up, creating a community where everyone had a chance to shine. And that, Ethan thought, was the greatest victory of all. The regional robotics competition was over, but its effects lingered in the hallways of the school like an echo. Ethan and his team had returned home with their second-place trophy, greeted by cheers from classmates and teachers alike. For once, the spotlight wasn't just on athletes or popular kids. It was on a group of students who had worked together to create something meaningful. The school buzzed with pride, and even those who hadn't been part of the project felt inspired. Ethan found himself walking taller these days. It wasn't because of the trophy or the praise. It was the sense of belonging he'd discovered. For so long, he'd felt invisible, like no one cared about what he had to offer. But now people saw him differently, not as the janitor's kid, but as someone capable of leading, creating, and inspiring others. That shift in perception meant more to him than any award ever could. But change wasn't limited to Ethan. The bully, too, seemed to be on a different path. Since his apology weeks earlier, he'd made noticeable efforts to turn things around. He stopped picking on weaker students, avoided confrontations, and even started volunteering after school to help organize events. Some students were skeptical, whispering behind his back that this newfound kindness was just an act. Others, however, gave him the benefit of the doubt, recognizing that everyone deserved a chance to grow. One afternoon, during a quiet moment, in the library, Ethan ran into the bully while returning books to the shelves. They exchanged awkward smiles before the bully spoke up. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure," Ethan replied, setting the stack of books aside. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," the bully hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know how I said I wanted to do better? Well, I've been trying, but honestly, I don't really know where to start. Like, fixing stuff is your thing, right? Building robots and all that. But me? I don't have anything like that." Ethan tilted his head, considering the question. "It doesn't have to be about building things," he said thoughtfully. "Strength comes in different ways. Maybe for you, it's about using your voice, not to hurt people, but to lift them up. Or maybe it's about finding something you're passionate about and pouring your energy into it." The bully frowned, clearly unsure. "But what if I don't know what I'm passionate about? What if I mess up again?" "You won't figure it out overnight," Ethan admitted. "And yeah, you might slip up sometimes. Everyone does. But the important thing is to keep trying. Start small, like helping someone carry their books or sitting with someone who looks lonely at lunch. Those little actions add up." For a moment, the bully didn't say anything. Then slowly, he nodded. "Okay, yeah, I can try that." The weeks passed. The bully began making good on his promise. At first, his gestures were subtle. A compliment here, a kind word there. But they didn't go unnoticed. One day during gym class, he noticed a younger student struggling to tie his shoelaces properly. Instead of laughing or walking away, he knelt down and showed him how to double knot them. Another time, he offered to tutor a classmate who was struggling with math, surprising both the student and himself with his patience. These moments weren't grand or dramatic, but they mattered. Slowly but surely, the bully started earning trust, not through force or intimidation, but through genuine effort. Even Ethan noticed the difference. During lunch breaks, the bully occasionally joined Ethan and his friends at their table, contributing to conversations and sharing stories about his own struggles. It was strange at first, seeing him laugh and joke like a normal person, but eventually, it became routine. Of course, not everyone was quick to forgive. Some students still held grudges, refusing to believe the bully had truly changed. And truthfully, Ethan understood why. They'd endured years of teasing and humiliation at his hands. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. But the bully didn't give up. If anything, their skepticism only fueled his determination to prove them wrong. One evening, as Ethan worked on a new invention in his garage, his dad walked in carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "How's it going?" he asked, handing one to Ethan. "It's coming along," Ethan replied, taking a sip. "Still working out some kinks, though." His dad leaned against the workbench, watching him tinker with wires and circuits. "No, son, I've been thinking about that boy, the one who used to bother you. Seems like he's trying to change." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, he is. It's weird, actually. He's not the same guy anymore." He reminds me of someone, his dad said with a smile. Someone else who used to be underestimated, someone who proved everyone wrong. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. Dad, come on. No, seriously, his dad continued. People judge each other based on what they see on the surface. But real strength? That's what's inside. You showed him that, whether you realize it or not. Ethan paused, letting the words sink in. His dad was right. The bully's transformation hadn't happened in isolation. It had been sparked by Ethan's willingness to stand up for himself, and later to forgive. Strength wasn't just about standing alone. It was about creating opportunities for others to rise alongside you. A few days later, the school announced plans for a community service project, cleaning up a local park littered with trash and debris. Students were encouraged to sign up, but participation was optional. To everyone's surprise, the bully was one of the first to volunteer. Not only that, he recruited several of his former teammates to join him, turning the cleanup into a team effort. On the day of the event, Ethan arrived at the park to find the bully already hard at work, gloves on and a garbage bag in hand. Didn't think you'd show up, the bully joked when he saw Ethan approach. Wouldn't miss it, Ethan replied with a grin, grabbing a pair of gloves from a nearby box. Together, they tackled the mess, working side by side with other volunteers. By the end of the afternoon, the park looked cleaner than it had in years, and the sense of accomplishment was palpable. As they packed up supplies, the bully turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. Thanks, he said simply. For everything. Ethan shrugged, brushing dirt off his jeans. You don't need to thank me. You did the hard part. The bully shook his head. No, man. You stood up to me when no one else would. You showed me what real strength looks like. Without that, I wouldn't be here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan extended his hand. We're good, all right? The bully grinned, shaking Ethan's hand firmly. Yeah, we're good. Looking back, Ethan realized how far they'd both come. From the tense showdown in the hallway to the camaraderie they shared now, their journey had been unpredictable, messy, and ultimately rewarding. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead for both of them, but they faced those challenges knowing they weren't alone. As Ethan walked home that evening, the sun setting behind him, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He'd learned that strength wasn't about overpowering others or proving yourself superior. It was about resilience, empathy, and the courage to grow. And sometimes, the greatest victories came not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into allies. As the school year drew to a close, the atmosphere in the hallways felt different. There was a sense of growth in the air, not just for Ethan or the bully, but for everyone around them. Conversations that once revolved around gossip and cliques now included talk of inventions, community projects, and even plans for the future. The school seemed lighter somehow, like it had shed an old skin and stepped into something new. Ethan noticed the change most in himself. He no longer walked through the halls with his head down, hoping to blend into the background. Instead, he greeted people by name, stopped to chat with classmates, and joined group discussions without hesitation. His confidence wasn't loud or showy. It was quiet, steady, and earned. And while some days still came with challenges, Ethan faced them knowing he wasn't alone. The friendships he'd built over the past few months were real, forged not out of convenience but shared experiences and mutual respect. The bully, too, had carved out a new identity for himself. Gone was the brash, intimidating figure who ruled the hallways with fear. In his place stood someone quieter, more thoughtful, someone who listened before speaking and acted with intention rather than impulse. It wasn't easy, of course. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when frustration got the better of him. But each time he caught himself slipping back into old patterns, he reminded himself of the lessons he'd learned. That strength isn't about domination. It's about lifting others up even when it's uncomfortable. One afternoon, as Ethan sat on the bleachers during lunch, the bully approached him carrying 2 bottles of soda. Mind if I sit? He asked, holding up one of the bottles. Sure, Ethan replied, scooting over to make room. What's this for? No reason, the bully said, handing him the soda. Just figured we should celebrate. Celebrate what? The end of the year, the bully answered with a shrug. And everything else. You know how far we've come. Ethan smiled, twisting the cap off the bottle. Yeah, I guess we have come pretty far. They sat there for a while, sipping their drinks and watching students mill about below. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the bully broke the silence. Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had gone differently? Like if you hadn't stood up to me that day? Ethan thought about it for a second. I don't know. Maybe nothing would have changed. Or maybe I would have kept letting people push me around until I snapped. Either way, I'm glad it turned out like this. Me too, the bully admitted. I mean, yeah, losing sucked. But honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. If I hadn't seen what you were capable of, I wouldn't have realized how much I needed to change. Ethan nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Sometimes failure is the catalyst for growth, if you're willing to learn from it. Both of them had failed in their own ways. Ethan had failed to speak up sooner, and the bully had failed to see the harm he was causing. But instead of letting those failures define them, they'd used them as stepping stones toward something better. Later that week, the school held its annual awards ceremony. Students filed into the auditorium, chatting excitedly about who might win which accolade. Ethan didn't expect to hear his name called. He'd already received recognition for the robotics competition. But when the principal announced the Outstanding Student Award, his heart skipped a beat. This year's recipient has demonstrated incredible resilience, creativity, and leadership, the principal began, scanning the crowd. He's inspired his peers, contributed to our community, and shown us all what it means to overcome adversity. Please join me in congratulating Ethan Carter. The room erupted into applause as Ethan made his way to the stage, his face flushed with surprise. Accepting the award, he looked out at the sea of faces and felt a lump rise in his throat. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was proof that standing up for yourself and staying true to your values could inspire others to do the same. But the surprises didn't stop there. As Ethan returned to his seat, the principal cleared her throat and continued. We also have a special commendation this year for someone who has shown remarkable growth and dedication to becoming a better person. While this individual hasn't always made the right choices, he's taken significant steps to turn his life around. Let's give a round of applause for the Most Improved Student Award winner. When the principal called out the bully's name, the entire auditorium went silent. For a moment, the bully sat frozen, unsure whether to stand or stay seated. Then, encouraged by cheers from Ethan and a few other classmates, he rose hesitantly and walked to the stage. The applause grew louder as he accepted the certificate, his expression a mix of disbelief and gratitude. As he returned to his seat, Ethan leaned over and whispered, "Told you you'd figure it out." The bully grinned, shaking his head. "Still, feels weird though." "Weird in a good way, right?" Ethan teased. "Yeah," the bully admitted, "in a really good way." After the ceremony, students gathered outside to take photos and exchange contact information before summer break. Ethan stood near the fountain, scrolling through messages on his phone, when a group of younger kids approached him shyly. "Hey, can we ask you something?" one of them said. "Of course," Ethan replied, putting his phone away. "What's up?" "Well," the boy hesitated, glancing at his friends for support. "We heard about your drone and everything, and we were wondering, do you think we could build something cool like that someday?" Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Absolutely. Anyone can build something amazing if they put their mind to it. Start small, tinker with stuff, ask questions, and don't be afraid to fail. That's how you learn." The kids beamed, clearly inspired. As they ran off to rejoin their friends, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. Once, he'd been one of those kids, unsure of himself, eager to prove his worth. Now he was someone others looked up to, someone who could guide and encourage them. Nearby, the bully stood talking to a few of his former teammates. They laughed and joked like old friends, their bond stronger than ever. Watching them, Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Life wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But progress was happening. One step, one choice, one person, at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Ethan took a deep breath. Summer stretched ahead, full of possibilities. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready for whatever came next. Because strength isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about finding your voice, forgiving others, and building bridges where there were once walls. And sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones you win alone. They're the ones you share with the people who helped you get there. With that thought, Ethan turned and joined his friends, laughing and planning adventures for the weeks ahead. Whatever tomorrow brought, he'd face it with courage, kindness, and a heart full of hope. In a small suburban high school, life was all about cliques and who stood where in the social hierarchy. At the bottom of this invisible ladder lived a shy teenager named Ethan Carter. He wasn't loud or flashy. Instead, he preferred to stay under the radar. His dad worked as the school janitor, which made him an easy target for snide remarks and cruel jokes. Most kids didn't bother getting to know him. They just saw the janitor's kid and decided that was enough. Ethan didn't let it bother him too much, at least not on the surface. Deep down, though, every insult stung. But he had something others didn't see, a sharp mind and a knack for fixing things. This talent came from years of helping his dad around the school. Whether it was tightening loose screws on a classroom chair or figuring out why the vending machine kept jamming, Ethan could solve problems with ease. Still, none of that mattered to the bullies. All they cared about was finding someone weaker to pick on. And then there was the bully himself, a tall, athletic guy everyone knew by reputation. Let's call him the bully. The bully ruled the hallways like he owned the place. Loud, brash, and always looking for attention, he thrived on making others feel small. To him, power wasn't about being kind or smart. It was about fear. And Ethan? Well, Ethan became one of his favorite punching bags. One fateful afternoon after football practice, the bully spotted Ethan walking alone near the gym lockers. There were no teachers nearby, and only a handful of students lingered in the hallway. It was the perfect setup for what happened next. Without warning, the bully shoved Ethan hard against the cold brick wall. Ethan stumbled backward, his books falling to the floor with a thud. "You think you're better than us?" The bully sneered, his voice echoing off the walls. "Just because your dad mops floors here doesn't mean you belong." A few students stopped to watch, some laughing nervously while others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. Ethan felt his face flush with embarrassment. He wanted nothing more than to disappear right then and there. But before the bully could say anything else, something unexpected happened. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. Instead of shrinking back or crying like the bully expected, Ethan locked eyes with him. For a moment, silence filled the hallway. Then, in a calm but firm voice, Ethan said, "You think pushing people around makes you strong? You don't know anything about real strength." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The bully froze, caught off guard. No one had ever talked back to him like that before. Usually his victims either cowered or tried to run away. But Ethan? He stood his ground, his expression unreadable. For a second it seemed like the bully might lash out again. But instead, Ethan bent down, picked up his books, and walked away without another word. The crowd parted as he moved through the hallway, leaving behind murmurs of shock and confusion. What had just happened? Why hadn't Ethan fought back or at least cried? As Ethan disappeared around the corner, the bully stood there, fists clenched, unsure of what to do next. Something about Ethan's reaction gnawed at him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Meanwhile, Ethan kept walking, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing up to the bully felt good, but he also knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was just the beginning. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his room, replaying the incident in his head. He wondered if he'd done the right thing. Sure, it felt empowering to finally speak up, but the bully wasn't someone who forgave easily. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing, and he was right. Little did he know, the events of that day would set off a chain reaction neither he nor the bully could have predicted. But for now, Ethan focused on what he did best: fixing things. On his desk lay a half-finished gadget he'd been working on, a tiny drone designed to help his dad with maintenance tasks around the school. As he tinkered with its wiring, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, he had more strength than he realized.